Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lords of Limited. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan Lord Tupperware in the Karlov Manor with the lead pipe sax. Ethan, we got to get down to the serious business. The people want to know, what cards are breaking Pioneer open in Murders at Karlov Manor?
Do you not know?
No, not a clue.
Oh, and no more no
Intended.
more lies, which is the mana leak, the white blue counter thing unless they pay 3 and then exile it if it gets countered that way. I mean, blue white control is already like one of the best decks in the format pre Murders at Karlov Manor, and I think of the spoilers so far, no more lies seems to be the most impactful. Like upgrading, make disappear is the counter spell from Streets of New Capenna, like 1 and a blue with casualty. That's been in that slot, the 2 mana counter slot, and this is just such a huge upgrade from that. So I think that's the card.
Wow. See, I kind of ancillarily knew that from Twitter.
That's what I'm
If
saying.
you asked me, I know a lot of things about Constructed from Twitter.
I know, yeah, it's great. Twitter is both great and terrible. So if you're not on there, folks, get on. It can be a great time sink for you. Ben, we have so many previews to talk about. Like
So many.
Watsy heard the limited players' cries from LCI when like we kind of were scraping the bottom of the barrel. Then they did like a huge common dump right at the end. Not the case here for Murders at Karlov Manor.
Not the case at all. This is by far the most cards we've had in total when we've recorded this episode on a Sunday. Usually we're like, maybe we need to wait until a Monday to get some more cards in here. None of that discussion this time. And way more commons than usual. Usually the majority of this episode is uncommons with 5 or 6 commons sprinkled in. We've got a lot of commons, 5, 6, 7, 8 per color.
So no dilly-dallying. We're going to get down to brass tacks here. We'll talk about a couple housekeeping things, and then we're going to dive into talking about as many of these commons and uncommons as we can before we dive into the crash course next week. First things first, the Patreon page. Patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show if they so choose. We always talk about the Patreon being a great place to be for new set season because you get access to the Discord. The Discord is just an excellent spot for folks to be talking about the spoilers as they roll in. Once the full set drops, the full card image gallery drops, people are going to be making their tier lists. Once the set is up on that, what's it called now? It's not the Heroku app. What is it? The
Draftmancer.
Once it's up on Draftmancer, folks are going to be doing practice drafts via our Discord. So there's going to be a lot of like preset action, and that's even before folks post their pictures of their sealed pools from their pre-releases at their LGSs, and then when the full set drops in a couple weeks on Magic Online and Magic Arena. So all that good stuff is available to you via our Discord, and a lot of other great perks as you move up the reward tier rankings on Patreon. And we also want to shout out our new patrons the first week that they join. So this week we're welcoming Jordan, Brad, Dr. Strange, Trevor, Mark, Tim, Edward, McNerdy, Daniel, and Adrian. Thank you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, cannot say thank you enough. Show is also brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., coolstuffinc.com, where they've got cool stuff in stock and at the PT at MagicCon Chicago, where you should be as well. You're going to be repping some coolstuffinc.com gear. You got a hoodie, you got some sleeves. Going to be repping that competition in the PT. They've also got anything you need as far as Murders at Karlov Manor pre-orders. So check out whatever you want from Murders at Karlov Manor, whether that's play booster boxes or whether that's maybe some copies of the newest blue-white counterspell whose name I already can't remember for your Pioneer deck.
No more lies.
No more lies. There it is. No more lies. You need to do your Magic card shopping at coolstuffinc.com. And when you do, use checkout code LOL all caps to get 5% off anything in the store.
Boom. All right, let's get into it. New mechanics. We've known for a little bit, thanks to one of our free preview cards from Watsy, but Morph is back as Disguise, which begs the question, do we think next time they bring some old set to Arena like out of the blue like they did with KTK?
That it means a mechanic coming back? The tinfoil hats are coming on?
I mean, that has to be it, that they were practicing coding Morph on Arena. That's why they brought it there, I have to imagine. Anyway, but we have Morph back with a twist. Disguise is Morph with Ward 2, which is pretty nice, right? So like it makes it so you don't get as punished for playing a 3-mana 2/2 and then they, shock it or whatever. They're going to have to at least pay equal, if not trading down on mana for their removal spells.
Yeah, and if you're new to Morph, maybe you didn't play Cons of Tarkir on Arena when I was back, morphing is casting a creature face down as a 3-mana colorless 2/2 creature with Ward 2 now with Disguise. And then you can turn it face up any time for its disguise cost. So it'll have an alternate cost on the card that you can flip it up for. But while it's down, it's face down, nameless, no mana cost, nothing, and has Ward 2 in this instance with disguise.
It still doesn't use the stack, right? It's faster than instant speed to flip up something with Morph. And if you're playing in paper pre-release or at the Pro Tour, oh my God, don't get a game loss, Ethan. You need to remember to reveal all face down cards at the end of the game.
Yeah, so that is hype that you're going to need to remember that at the PT, and also kind of stressful. But the reason for this, if you haven't played in paper, is that theoretically a person could, if they were ill-intentioned, very easily cheat, right? You could morph a land face down, a basic land, an island. You could disguise an island and say it's a 2/2 with War 2, when in fact that is not a legal game action. So you have to show your opponent at the end of the game that you did, in fact, not cheat with your disguise creatures. And we've got an example here. We've got Defenestrated Phantom. I don't think phantoms die from getting thrown out the window, but what do we got going on here?
It's 4 white for a 4/3 flyer at common, and it has disguise for 4 and a white. So play it for 3 mana face down as a 2/2, and then at any time you can flip it up for 4 and a white. Definitely one of the less exciting disguise creatures, I think, that we've seen.
Oh, for sure. That takes us on to our next new mechanic, which is Cloak, which is a redone version of Manifest, which is very similar to Morphing. So this is Manifest with Ward 2. And for those of you who are new to Manifest, works exactly like Morphing or Disguising in this case, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a creature. So it's possible to end up with things cloaked on the battlefield that are spells or lands or something, because you're moving cards, you're cloaking cards potentially from the top of your deck or your top of your opponent's deck, or in the case of our preview card here, getting a chance to reshuffle your disguise creatures.
Yeah, very, very cool card here in Expose the Culprit. So 1 and a red instant, choose one or both. You can turn target face down creature face up, or you can exile any number of face up creatures you control with disguise in a face down pile, shuffle that pile, then cloak them. So get to sort of shuffle up and deal, surprise, surprise, you don't know which of these creatures is which, as well as getting to maybe get a cost reduction on flipping up a face down creature. Now, the way that these are ordered on the card means you can't turn a bunch face down and then use the turn any face up portion of this card on one of those, right? Because things happen in the order on the card.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that is true. And also for cloaking, if you happen to cloak a creature that is not something with disguise, the way to turn it up is paying its mana cost.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you cloak a card that is whatever, just a random 6 mana 6/6, you'll pay the 6 mana for the card and flip it face up into a 6/6, the same you would as a creature with disguise by paying its disguise cost. The disguise essentially is its mana value.
Next, we have Suspect. If you suspect a creature, that creature gains a new designation, Suspected. A suspected creature has menace and can't block for as long as it remains suspected. And then once suspected, a creature remains so until it leaves the battlefield or another effect causes it to no longer be suspected.
This mechanic makes so much more sense to me now. I kept reading it in my head as a noun instead of a verb, and it makes so much more sense with the verb pronunciation. I thank you for clearing that up for me. It just felt wrong the whole time I was dealing with it, and now it feels right. That's good.
That BFA training, baby. What can you say? And if a suspected creature stops being a creature, it remains suspected. When would that happen?
I don't know. Maybe if an enchantment turns it, like some enchantments sometimes turn things into an enchantment, like Lost in the Stars or whatever that card is.
And it's not like a ring bearer, right? You could have multiple suspects.
Yeah, multiple suspects. Your board can be very sus.
Yeah, okay. So, for example, we've got Argus Kos, Spirit of Justice. This is 2 red white for a mythic. Oh no, we don't talk about mythics here. 2 red white for a 2/4 double strike vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you choose up to 1 target creature. If it's suspected, exile it. Otherwise, suspect it.
Yeah, I like this mechanic. It's kind of dual purpose in that
Right.
it's going to help your aggressive decks like get menace and your creatures attack, but you also, if you suspect your opponent's creatures, can stop them from blocking. It's very, very cool.
There's an aura later on we're going to talk about that it suspects a thing and then you can return that order to your hand. So potentially you could, use that to make, your stuff great or whatever, your stuff gain menace, but also make your opponent's stuff not be able to block. So that's very interesting.
We've also got Collecting Evidence. This is our next mechanic. Collect evidence will always appear with a number and will be a cost that you'll pay in a variety of contexts. So maybe activating an ability, maybe as a ward cost, as additional cost for a spell. And so when something asks you to collect evidence, you can exile any number of cards from your graveyard with total mana value equal to or greater than the indicated number. So we've seen a lot of evidence 3s and evidence 6s so far. What's our
Yeah.
preview card here? We've got Axebane Ferox.
Yeah, 2 green for a 4/4 rare with Death Touch and Haste, and it has Ward, Collect Evidence 4. So if you want to target this thing, you're going to have to exile total mana value of 4 or greater from your graveyard.
And so that could be one card with mana value 4. If you, for whatever reason, want to get more cards out of your graveyard, you can go way in excess of 4 if you'd like. You can exile like 6 cards with whatever mana value, 30, and you're still paying the cost. But you have to get to at least 4 to be able to start exiling cards from your graveyard.
So gonna need some self-mill to be able to feel like you can collect evidence pretty reliably.
Yes, I think so for sure. And also will, similar to, I think, the stuff going on in LCI, be a late game mechanic.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Next up, we have cases, a new type of enchantment. You love to see it. Individual cases each have 3 abilities. The top ability is always active. Then there's a middle ability that tells you how you can solve the case. I gotta say, I'm not usually like a flavor guy. The flavor for this set is kind of off the charts.
It is hitting hard for me. Scooby-Doo is my favorite cartoon of all time. I have read every Nancy Drew book. I have read every Hardy Boys book. I love mysteries. I am stoked for this set.
Yeah. So the middle ability tells you how you can solve the case. And at the beginning of your end step, if the case is unsolved and you've met the conditions of the middle ability, the case becomes solved, puts a trigger on the stack that still needs to meet the conditions when it resolves. Once the case is solved, the last ability becomes activated. So what do we have as an example here?
We've got Case of the Filched Falcon, which is single blue for an uncommon case. And it says when this case enters the battlefield, investigate. You like that? It replaces itself. The middle chapter, it's going to be hard to not call these chapters. To solve, you control 3 or more artifacts. So that's going to go on the stack at the end of your turn if you control 3 artifacts. And your opponent has a chance to mess with you, right? Like if they blow up an artifact while that's on the stack, then you will no longer solve the case. Like if they manage to destroy one of your artifacts before that trigger resolves. So that's kind of what's going on there. You have to, at the end of your turn, and also after the trigger resolves, meet the condition. And then if you do, the case is solved, and now you can pay 2 and a blue to sacrifice Case of the Filched Falcon to put 4 +1/+1 counters on target non-creature artifact. Becomes a 0/0 bird creature with flying in addition to its other types. So conveniently, you might have the clue from earlier laying around to turn into a 4/4 flyer.
Now, do you have to pay that 2 and a blue in your end step? No, right? It's just like
you can do it at any time. Once it's solved, then it's like active and just does what it says at the bottom third of the card.
So those are all of the new mechanics. We do have a couple of returning mechanics. We've talked about clues a little bit. Investigate is back. When you investigate, you create a clue token, which is a colorless artifact token with 2. Sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. And there's also synergy in the set with sacrificing artifacts as well, which we'll get to when we talk about some cards a little later on.
So here we've got Auspicious Arrival. This is 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and you investigate. Just a nice, clean combat trick that's going to get you up some card advantage.
Doomblade draw a card, baby. You love to see it.
Whew. Lastly, we've got split cards as a returning mechanic here. This is a very cool throwback. I have not actively drafted any of the sets that have split cards. It was always when I was kind of taking a break from Magic, so I'm excited to test these out.
I did a paper draft of Ravnica Remastered the other night, and saw split cards in paper, I think for the first time. I saw Find Finality in paper. I was like, these are tiny. I mean, I played
very small.
I played split cards way back in the day in Invasion when they first came out, but I don't think I'd seen them in paper since then.
I guess I have done it. I played with Find Finality.
Yeah.
For some reason, this is OG Ravnica to me. But anyway, we've got Push Pull here as our first card. Push is 1 and a hybrid white or black mana, so you can pay either white or black mana as a sorcery to destroy target tapped creature. And the other half of the card is Pull, which is 4 hybrid Rakdos for a sorcery. Put up to 2 target creature cards from a single graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. They gain haste until end of turn. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step.
Wow, that's really cool. Again, those are both what you love to see from split cards. One is that there's flexibility in the draft, right? So a black player has access to both halves of this, but a white drafter can take it for push. Probably a red drafter won't take it just for pull. But so that's something to keep in mind with hybrid mana as we will move forward and talk about them with some disguise creatures. But also nice that these are just so applicable in wildly different situations, right?
Yeah, very versatile and very distinct separate cards.
We also have Fuss and Bother. Fuss is 2 and red-white hybrid for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. And Bother is 4 Azorius hybrid for a sorcery. Create 3 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Surveil 2. Oh yeah, Surveil is back too, right? I mean, I guess Surveil is sort of evergreen at this point.
That's what I
But
would think, yeah.
Surveil has like real cool flavor in the like world of detectives and cases and whatever, but also that's a way for you to fuel your graveyard for those graveyard matters stuff.
Yeah, Imperial Oath is back, baby.
I mean, that card's good.
I mean, it's
things
less good
carry-
than Imperial Oath, right? Like, you'd rather have 3 2/2s with Vigilance when you're trying to stabilize. I mean, it's better when you're probably at parity or ahead,
Yeah,
but less good at stabilizing than Imperial Oath. But
that's
also,
fair.
just having Fuss is also great.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right, that's going to bring us into the draft archetypes. First up is blue-white detectives. I love the WotC verbiage here. Get on your opponent's case with this fast mid-range strategy. Leverage detective typal bonuses to overwhelm your opponent's defenses and sacrifice clues to refill your hands in the late game. We already chatted about one of these cards, No More Lies, the white-blue counterspell. Much better in constructed than in limited, but I do think that this is like 2 mana, like mana leak is good in limited.
Yeah. We've also got Private Eye, 1 white blue for a 3/3 homunculus detective at uncommon. Other detectives you control get +1/+1, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, target detective can't be blocked this turn.
Interesting. And the last card here is a common. This is Granite Witness, 2 white blue for a 3/2 with flying and vigilance. It's an artifact creature as well. It has disguise for Azorius hybrid. And when Granite Witness is turned face up, you may tap or untap target creature. Ooh.
Yeah, detectives look strong. I would imagine Private Eye will be quite a good card and a strong pull into blue-white detectives.
And let's chat about these disguise hybrid costs as well, because I think it's very interesting. And I'm hyper focused. We haven't even talked about like how I messaged you earlier. Like it's so stressful. I'm in 2 Pro Tour Discord chats, and being a part of preview season for constructed as well is the first time I've ever experienced that, like caring about cards as they're coming out for constructed is no bueno. But I'm like I have 2 like pretty high stakes competitive events to draft this format, right? There'll also be 3 rounds of limited in the Arena Champs 5, and that'll be Murders at Karlov Manor when the dust has settled, right? The end of March. So we'll have played this set to death by that point. But thinking about these disguise costs, some of them, I think, or some of the cards that are common with these disguise hybrid costs, I have to imagine are going to be pretty high picks because they're so flexible, right? Like, I don't know if Granite Witness quite meets the criteria for me, but a couple of them later on we'll talk about. But the fact that, like, again, a white blue drafter can play this, but a white drafter can also play this, and a blue drafter can also play this, right? You can be white red and put this in your deck and say, hey, this is my morph, and I can flip it up or whatever. Now, it's going to be obviously less good, a little bit more restrictive there, but that flexibility gives you, like, we talk about like optionality in draft, the flexibility that gives you in your draft. Let's say when you're taking like whatever, you go white card, and then you see this as an option for you is pretty big game, I think.
Well, especially an option for you without feeling like, okay, I've got to commit to white blue. Like an
Right.
option for you to stay white, and also potentially going to have huge impacts for mana bases too. I mean, it's way too early to call stuff like that, but might have more of an Eldraine-esque effect where you're going to want like, if you're white blue, or maybe let's say you're white red, you're going to want like 10 white if you're running cards like Granite Witness in your deck. Maybe you're going to want to try to go 10-7 or 11-6. Who knows?
Yeah, we might see like near monocolored decks in this format be possible thanks to these hybrid costs.
All right, that takes us on to Blue-Black Clues Control, where the tagline is to use defensive spells to extend the game and generate clues, then turn the excess mana into a card advantage that will bury your opponent under a mountain of value.
First up, we have Curious Cadaver. It's an uncommon 2 blue-black for a 3/1 flyer. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, return Curious Cadaver from your graveyard to your hand. Not crazy about this card, I have to say. 4 mana, 3/1 flyers, and great, and there's a lot of mana investment. You're paying 2 to crack your clue. This comes back to your hand, and you pay 4 mana to get it into play. I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah, It's a lot. I could see it being very annoying, assuming you've hit your land drops and made it to the late game, but at that point, you've probably already won. Like, this does not really help you make it to the late game, and those types of cards are probably going to be more important. I am
Oh my
excited about our
god.
next card, which is
Yeah.
Fairy Snoop, 1 blue-black for a common. This is a 1/4 flying Fairy Detective. It's got disguise for 1 Demir, and whenever it's turned face up, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one into your hand and the other into your graveyard. What a Magic the Gathering card.
I mean, I think this card, like, maybe it's just coming off of Lost Caverns, but I'm like looking at low power, high toughness creature that can block in the air that also gives you this mountain of value, right? Like, and it's also so flexible because of the hybrid cost. Like this, I mean, who knows? We're making hot takes, but as I learned from the recap of 2023, I gotta up my hot take count. This has like best, not best common, but I think this is going to be one of the best commons in the set. Like this is, or one of the best commons to pick early. I will say, like, this is so good.
Yeah, see, now you're up in the take game because you already made the take that I was going to make and you beat me to it. You're going to
Yes,
be a take master before we
that's
get
right.
going here.
Next up is red black suspect aggro. Suspected creatures have menace and can't block. Keep attacking with your suspicious characters, and your opponents will be helpless to stop them. Our example here is an uncommon deadly complication. 1 black red for a sorcery. Choose one or both. Destroy target creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on target suspected creature you control. You may have it become no longer suspected.
This card's a beating. This is going to enable some attacks. This is going to be a, oh, I hope my opponent doesn't have deadly complication, fingers crossed type card.
Yeah, it's got, I'm not remembering it, but from Ether Revolt, the 1 black red, like, destroy a thing. If you control an artifact, they lose 3 life. Like, when you have this sort of like, sure, like 3 mana to kill a thing. I mean, it's 2 colors, but, and sorcery speed only. But like, you're also potentially being able to push a ton of damage, right? Like, kill a thing, enable an attack with something else. Like, that's a lot.
Well, and we also talk about cards being two-way players too. Like if you get into a jam, like you're on the front foot, attacking, and your opponent's starting to stabilize, you can kill their thing and like, well, I really probably would like to block with this creature. Let me shift gears and like unsuspect one of my creatures so that I can start to play defense now.
Yeah, great point.
All right, we've got one more card here in red-black, which is Shady Informant. 3 black-red for a common, 4/2 Ogre Rogue. And whenever it dies, it deals 2 damage to any target. You can disguise it for 2 Rakdos. This one I am a little less excited about.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you're sort of seeing that pinch on your mana. Like the idea could be like, oh, I'm gonna flip this up in combat, trade, and then pick off an opposing disguised creature. But you need 2 mana to be able to do that,
Right.
right? To pay for the ward. So I'm also pretty dubious of this, and dubious of our next archetype, which is red green big disguise, which we actually don't have any cards for yet, but we'll just chat about what the little blurb is. It's spend the early game accelerating your mana, setting up a face down board state, then beat down your opponent's side of the board by flipping over Haymaker after Haymaker. So red green looking to be the disguise, the morph color pair. I wonder if we'll see a secret plans, like something that like alludes to, you know, like we saw before in cons of like, okay, you've got these face down creatures, but then a bonus for flipping up creatures. Maybe red green will be the home for multicolor morph disguise cards, you know?
Yeah, like an enchantment that when you flip them up, they get +2/+2 and trample until end of turn or something. That could be
Ooh,
like pretty brutal.
Ben's taking off his detective hat, putting on his designer hat over there.
That takes us on to our next archetype, which is green-white, go wide, disguise. Flood the battlefield with face-down creatures and accrue impressive rewards when they're turned face-up. So we've got Buried in the Garden here. This is 2 green-white for an uncommon aura. Enchant land. Whenever this enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent you don't control until Buried in the Garden leaves the battlefield. And whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of any color. Classic go wide card.
Yeah, classic go wide card. Well, the next one will fit the bill, which is Sumala Sentry, green white for a 1/3 elf archer with reach. This is also an uncommon. And it says whenever a face down permanent you control is turned face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it and a +1/+1 counter on Sumala Sentry. That is sexy.
Yeah, very nice payoff for disguising your creatures. And Buried in the Garden, also a cool variation on an O-ring type effect to help fix and ramp you. I like both those cards.
I'm in for it. Next up, so we had big disguise, go wide disguise. Now we have black white Pint-sized disguise. Face down creatures bolster your strategy, which rewards playing creatures with power 2 or less and boosting them to become more impressive attackers. We've seen some cards previewed here at higher rarity, but nothing yet in the common or uncommon domain.
That takes us on to an archetype that I am very excited about, which is blue-red artifact sacrifice. Tagline here is to generate and sacrifice clue tokens strategically to gain a massive card advantage over your opponent, then chip away at their defenses by attacking with evasive thopters that bring death from above.
Dun dun dun.
So first up, we've got Gleaming Gear Drake. Looks cute at first. Blue-red for an uncommon 1/1 flyer. I'm going to ETBs investigate.
Oof.
Already into that card.
Yeah.
And then whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Gleaming Gear Drake.
That is excellent. I also am
this costing 2 instead of 3 is a big deal, right? They could have easily made this cost 1 blue-red.
Yes, yeah, this is huge. I am also really excited about the common that we see in this color pair, Gadget Technician, 2 blue-red for a 3/2. When it ETBs or is turned face up, you make a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So, Old Tech Cloud Guard, 4 mana, 3/2 with a 1/1 flyer. So obviously this doesn't have flying itself. But the disguise cost on this has disguise for double is it hybrid. So again, this card is good, I think, on its own, but is going to go up in draft because of the flexibility of this mana cost.
Yeah, this card is incredible. This has Chimney Rabble, Otech, Cloud Guard vibes all over it. I love this card. It looks quite strong.
Next up, we have green-black classic graveyard stuff. No, it's called.
Just gave it up. It is. It's called Grave Break. They're just like, yeah, do some things with your graveyard. We don't know.
So you use the collect evidence mechanic and raise the dead to support a long game strategy that gives you extra value whenever a creature card leaves your graveyard. So first up, the uncommon here we have is Crawl Whipcracker, black-green for a 3/2 with reach. And when it enters the battlefield, destroy target token an opponent controls. That's actually pretty good. Depending on how prevalent clue tokens running around are, which they do seem pretty prevalent, pretty good.
Yeah, classic graveyard stuff. ETB, destroy target token and opponent controls. Love it.
Wow. The criticism.
No, I actually really like that these gold cards aren't very obviously do the thing. Yeah. They're just pretty premium cards, but not too pushed. Yeah. I like it. They're just good limited cards. And then I do think from some of the commons we've seen, we haven't seen, granted it's early still, but we've seen some number of cards. We haven't seen a ton of super pushed commons either.
No, not yet.
We've also got a Rakish Scoundrel here for black-green. This is the common. 2 black-green for a common 3/3 Elf Rogue with Death Touch. And whenever it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, and you can disguise it for 4 Golgari.
Very, very not excited about this card.
It's I'm not, little clunky.
This card are quite poor, I think.
Yeah, a little clunky.
Red White Battalion is next. What's going on here?
This classic Ravnican strategy adds extra punch to aggressive red and white creatures by providing a bonus whenever you attack with 3 or more of them. First up, we've got an iconic card here in Lightning Helix.
Can you hear this card? Can you read this card without hearing Randy Bueller yelling, "Oh my God, it's Lightning Helix"? Do you know the clip I'm talking about?
I do know the clip you're talking about, but that does not live rent free in my head.
It's always there for me. And that's you got back to the beginning of the episode. Probably the other most impactful Pioneer card is Lightning Helix coming into the fray. That's huge.
Next up, we've got a throwback to my Scooby-Doo love from my childhood. We've got Meddling Youths. 3 red-white for a 4/5 uncommon, hasty human detective bunch. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, investigate. It's going to pack a punch.
Yeah, for sure. I am very excited about this common Dog Walker. It's red-white for a 3/1 with vigilance, and it has disguise for Boros hybrid. And when Dog Walker is turned face up, you get 2 tapped 1/1 white dog creature tokens. The modality here is just awesome. 2 mana, 3/1 vigilance. If you want to play your 2-drop, if you can afford to do the thing in installments, you get 3 bodies, which works towards the battalion life. And again, the fact that a red-blue player can take this, a white-black player can take this, pretty sweet.
Yeah, Dog Walker is pushed. I think Dog Walker and certainly the blue-red one, the Gadget Technician, those look like, and Fairy Snoop,
yes,
the blue-black one. Those look like great cards so far.
I agree. Last up here is blue green. Collect evidence. Rapidly fill up your graveyard and collect evidence to power up your spells while amassing permanents that reward you each time you do so. Do we just want to call it now? Blue green's the worst archetype.
I
Should
mean,
that,
I was kind of thinking they got the worst mechanic again. The one that takes the one that has the most hoops to jump through.
right? Yeah.
We'll see. First card up here we've got is Repulsive Mutation. This is blue green X for an instant. Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, then counter up to one target spell unless its controller pays mana equal to the greatest power among creatures you control.
Yeah, you're not selling me here, blue green. You're also not selling me on your common Undercover Crocodile, which is 4 green blue for a 5/5. It's an elf crocodile detective. I have to say, this art does not seem undercover. This really reminds me of when the Ninja Turtles are wearing trench coats in like the first Ninja Turtles movie. I'm like, you guys aren't blending in. Sorry to
This
say. So when
It looks like
Undercover,
the villain from Spider-Man, the
oh yeah,
lizard
the
guy.
green
That's what it
goblin, you
looks like
mean?
to me. No, not the Green Goblin, the guy that turns into a lizard. He's down in the sewers, like he's got his lair down there. There's
You lot.
definitely some sort of reptile villain in Spider-Man that is not the Green Goblin.
This and he wears a sweet fedora.
Stop.
Whenever Undercover Crocodile deals combat damage to a player, investigate, and it has disguise for 3 hybrid Simic. Yeah, I just think this is just it's so expensive.
It's very expensive,
Yeah, not into
but
it.
is going to be great evidence to collect out of the graveyard. I mean, yeah, so
Ye-
that's also the rub. Like
That's interesting, right?
collect evidence wants you to play high mana value spells, but you can't play tons of high mana value spells in
But
your
if you
limited decks.
disguise them and then just trade off and they end up in the graveyard for 6, then that's a way to get it for cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's something. It's something. All right. We got to tweet these out a little earlier this week, but we got a couple official preview cards courtesy of Wizards of the Coast. First up is Undercity Eliminator. This is 3 black for a 3/3 Gorgon Assassin at uncommon. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact or creature, and when you do, exile target creature an opponent controls. I'm
This
in.
card seems incredible. Yeah.
I'm in. Yeah.
FTK, there's going to be tokens running around. There's going to be clues laying around, like which is something, but this
It's a
card
cost.
is
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
And also, we've seen in black, or we're going to see ways to rebuy creatures like this. This has got some Chupacabra Echo vibes, certainly for black decks.
I agree.
Next, we've got Culvert Ambusher. This is 3 GG for a 4/5 uncommon worm horror. Whenever it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, target creature blocks this turn if able. And it's got disguise for 4 and a green.
Yeah, I mean, I think less excited about this than the other one, but this is gonna mess with combat pretty effectively when it comes in or is turned face up.
Yeah, certainly harder to use, but has some 2-for-1 potential there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that takes us on to removal. Let's take an early look at what sort of removal spells we have. I really like this first one. It's a cool card. Extract a Confession, 1 and a black for a sorcery, common. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you can collect evidence 6. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. If evidence was collected, instead, each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. So, Edict early, really good Edict late.
Yeah, I mean, Edict early and likely to kill the thing you would want to kill anyway late. So yeah,
For
I
1
mean,
and a black, like a very efficient card potentially.
yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see like if this ends up being good. You probably can't load up on them, right? Because collect evidence. There's gonna be a pinch on that, right? There's going to be diminishing returns on the amount of collect evidence you want. Certainly the amount of collect evidence that are high numbers like this.
Right. It'll be a bit like Dell, right? Where you can probably
Right.
have like 2 to 4 cards that really care about collecting evidence, unless you are trying to hyper collect evidence or something.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have Galvanize. It's 1 and a red for an instant. Deals 3 damage to target creature. If you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, Galvanize deals 5 damage to that creature instead. A nice way for people to be able to kill Shieldred the Apocalypse and Pioneer for just 2 mana.
For just 2 mana and a bunch of damage to face, right? Because you've drawn 2 or more cards that turn.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, good call. Look at you, Pioneer Brain. This is great. Super efficient.
Yeah. And it's a common, right?
Yeah.
It's very pushed for a common.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a classic reprint in Shock, red for the instant, deal 2 damage to any target. That I'm sure will do some stuff. And worthwhile noting that it costs 1 so that you can potentially shock disguise creatures for 3.
Right. So you're getting, you're trading equal mana there when they pay their 3 mana for their creature. Green's got a removal spell here. It's Bite Down on Crime. McGruff the Crime Dog. 3 and a green for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may collect Evidence 6. It costs 2 less to cast if evidence was collected. Okay, so if you collect Evidence 6, it's 1 and a green. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn and deals damage to its power to target creature you don't control. Man, there's just someone in the lab just turning the knobs on like, all right, but what if it's +2/+0 and it fights? Okay, what if it's +1/+0 and it bites? What if it costs 4? What if it's 3, 2? Like, I don't know, man.
Still bad,
It's
right?
still
Like
bad.
this card looks rough.
I
Like
think
maybe
so.
if it were an instant, I'd be buying in slightly, but at sorcery speed, this seems tough. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess if you're collecting the evidence at 1 and a green, I like this card. But you're not going to be able to do that until much later in the game.
Which is like the longer the game, like the later you're playing this, the more likely you're playing this into open mana. That's the thing about like these tempo cards, or when I think about, again, it's hard to not think about Khans of Tarkir. We just had it. We're returning to the world of morphs, but like thinking about your Savage Punch life of like, play a 2-drop, play an Alpine Grizzly, Savage Punch, like, you're in those developing turns, you're so much less likely to get punished for trying to do this sort of like creature fights or bites thing. But I mean, I guess you could go 2-drop, 3-drop, Bite Down on Crime. Like, that's not
Well,
bad.
the other thing this does too that's kind of okay is you play your 3-drop disguise and it's got ward 2. So a little
So they
safer to
can't
curve into
really.
this
Yeah.
on turn 4. That's a thing.
Yeah, that's fair. But 4 mana sorcery speed removal that requires setup is a tough ask, I think.
I agree. Next up, we've got Not on My Watch. This is 1 and a white for an uncommon instant exile target attacking creature. Just a classic control card.
And then we've also got Long Goodbye, 1 and a black for an instant and uncommon. The spell can't be countered, and you destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. Seems fine.
Seems
So I guess
great.
can't.
Like being able to get disguise creatures for 2 mana still, like that's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
Really like that card.
All right, what's going on with mana fixing? We've seen all the hybrid costs for these cards. I got to know what our mana bases are going to look like.
We've got some good options. Pour one out for Evolving Wilds. We've got Escape Tunnel here. Common land, tap, sacrifice Escape Tunnel, search your library for basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Power Creep, it also has the ability, tap, sacrifice, target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn.
Yeah, it's so funny. In our Alchemize episode, I thought you were like trying to just power creep Evolving Wilds out. We were like, oh, no, we won't do that. And then Watsy was like, no, we actually will
Hold
be
my beer.
doing that.
We got this.
Yeah. Next, we've got Public Thoroughfare. It's a land at common, enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you sack it unless you tap an untapped artifact or land you control. And you can tap this for 1 mana of any color.
This is a tough sell.
Oh, I disagree.
Really?
Yeah, I think this is real. The fact that, so when we've seen these kinds of effects before,
I guess you don't have to pay 1.
You don't have to pay 1 all the time.
Yeah.
If you have a clue just hanging around.
Okay, I'm in. I take it back.
Yeah, I think this card's real.
I retract my statement. I'm walking through the Public Thoroughfare.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got Nervous Gardener. This is
apparently the Jason Yeh Invitational card. I don't know if you saw their tweet about this. They were like, I don't know if this is going to be the best green common or not, but this is definitely going to be my most drafted common week 1.
This is Nervous Gardener, 1 and a green for a 2/2. It's got Disguise for a green, and it says, whenever Nervous Gardener's turn face up, search your library for a land card of the basic land type, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there was a lot of discussion. I don't know if you were looking at this in the Lord's Limited Discord. There was a lot of discussion around this card. So the comp here is to think about this as Civic Wayfinder that costs 1 more, right? So usually we see that effect as 2 and a green for a 2/2, search up a basic, put it into your hand. This one costs 1 more, but it has, again, optionality. If you need to play a 2-mana 2/2, you can.
Right, and also curves nicely with itself in that you can play it on turn 3 as a disguise, and then turn 4, you can flip it up, make sure you hit your 4th land drop, and then potentially disguise another card, or just play any other 3-drop. There's a lot to like about this card, I think, as well as just enabling you playing all of the best cards in the format. I think this card's got lots of potential.
Yeah, I'm in for that card as well. Next up is Topiary Panther, 4GG for a 6/5 trample, and it has basic land cycling for 1 and a green. Okay, so we're not seeing a cycle, it looks like, right? This doesn't have forest cycling itself. It fixes, it lets you find any basic. I think I'm kind of in for paying 2 for that. I'm not loading up on this. I'm not taking it as a high pick, but like I'm kind of in for this.
Well, the other thing that's great about this card, you see all those tats on that
Oh,
panther? You're going to be collecting some evidence. All those tats are loaded up with evidence.
yeah. This is such an easy way to get collect evidence 6 enabled. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It's a
Okay.
really strong card in that sense too, where like you're going to be able to cycle again, splash, and then collect evidence 6. I do think like for as clunky as collect evidence
No,
looks at face value, they've
yeah.
seeded some really good stuff in here to help turn it on.
No, I'm in for it too. There's a lot of layers and overlap. It feels like with I'm sure like it'll become shorthand, but right now I'm sort of like I don't know. I'm Zach
The brilliant
Galifianakis.
mind. Yeah,
Yeah,
you got
right.
all the red lines, you got your things on the post-it
Exactly.
board. You love it.
Exactly.
Lastly, here we've got They Went This Way. 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. Search your library for a basic land card. Put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, and investigate. Giving you your card back.
Yeah, and a ramped mana to be able to invest in that clue. I can't imagine this will be a very high pick. Tough sell to take turn 3 off this way or 3 mana off this way at any stage of the game. But nice to have access to it, I suppose.
Yeah. All right, that takes us on to our cases here. Let's chat about these cards. First up, we've got Case of the Pilfered Proof. This is the white case. 1 and a white for an uncommon. Whenever a detective enters the battlefield under your control, and whenever a detective you control is turned face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it. That seems quite strong.
I mean, I guess you love these like don't affect the board, but if you are affecting the board, here's a little something something for you.
I mean, you're going to be very happy to play that card in a blue-white detective deck. Anthem for your team, 2 mana, baby. Getting those takes in.
Everything's an anthem. What happens next on this card?
So to solve it, you control 3 or more detectives. That's a little harder because this itself is not a detective. If you do manage to solve it, when it's solved, if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a clue token are created instead. And there are a lot of cards that die or like make a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token.
And I keep thinking, because of sagas or whatever, that this goes once it's solved. I mean, and it also would make sense once it's solved, it goes away. But that's not the case, right?
That's not the case. It stays around and is going to keep being an anthem for your detectives.
All right, next we have Case of the Gorgon's Kiss. This is a single black. When this case enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target creature that was dealt damage this turn. That's not really an effect we're ever super interested in limited. We've seen it before, like tacked on to draw a card, whatever. To solve, 3 or more creature cards were put into graveyards from anywhere this turn. Okay. And then when it's solved, it's a 4/4 Gorgon creature with Death Touch and Lifelink in addition to its other types. It's a lot of hoops, but man, is that a good payoff.
It's a great payoff, but it's like the perfect storm of things have to go right for
I
you, and like
know.
good players like can play around this.
Well, I
I don't
wonder.
know.
Because it's 3 or more creature cards were put into graveyards from anywhere this turn. I wonder if there are some fancy footwork you can do yourself in terms
Right,
of
that's fair, right?
use
Like you
the
could with
cycling creature,
right, yeah.
stuff like that. So think about descend in
All
that
right,
way,
I'm kind of into it. Like you trade off on turn 2 or turn 3, and then you can
and then you cycle.
cycle it and play this. Yeah. And
I'm,
you don't necessarily, so you're essentially kind of ignoring the first chapter, hoping to trade off in
right.
combat and then dump a creature like either via surveil or a basic land cycling creature, and then you can get tempo with this.
I'm not saying that this card is like good or a high pick or anything, but it has sort of like some build aroundy vibes to me in that middle chapter. No, in the solve portion of it here.
Next, we've got Case of the Burning Mask. This is 1 red for an enchantment case. And the first chapter is whenever it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target creature. Okay, great. I'm in up front.
Mm-hmm.
To solve it, 3 or more sources you controlled dealt damage this turn. So ideally, you're trying to solve
very
this
hard.
well when it comes down, right? So you would be maybe like you attacked with 2 creatures and then you played this post combat
okay.
or something. Like that seems doable to me.
Yeah.
It's not like they have to kill things. Like you can just have 2 creatures deal damage to your opponent or something.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's solved, you can sacrifice it to exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play one of them this turn.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter what's on the rest of this card because I'm kind of in for the first part. Like 3 mana deal 3. It's not great or anything. 3 mana deal 3 sorcery speed is not great or anything, but you'll play it. And then the fact that you have the potential to get an extra card, like a choice of a card of 3, it's pretty good.
It's a 2-for-1. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that card. I think it's quite good.
Yeah. Last case here is Case of the Trampled Garden, 2 and a green. When this case enters the battlefield, distribute 2+1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. Another Anthem effect here at the start of things. To solve, creatures you control have total power 8 or greater. Okay, a very linear, like this first part helps you get to the solved portion. And then if the case is solved, whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains trample until end of turn.
Some red green big disguise vibes going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tough card for me to evaluate. I feel like this goes back to Atali's favor staggering size discussions where like I will often underrate cards like this, but this a lot of the other ones seem like you have to sort of jump through hoops or the solve portion is pretty tough to do. This all seems fairly doable to me.
Yeah, and I do like that when it's solved, like a lot of the problems the big dumb creatures decks have is your things don't have trample. And that's
Well,
pretty scary, like when your giant monster is now a 7/7 trampler instead of a 6/6 not trampler, you know?
yeah. I love the clue overlap here that we're seeing with the equipment coming up next.
Yeah, this is some sweet flavor. At first, I was like, these have to be commander cards. These aren't really in the set, right? Nope, they are.
Yeah.
So we've got clue equipment. So first up, we've got lead pipe. This is black for an artifact clue equipment at uncommon. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 for an equip cost of 2. And whenever equipped creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And you can pay 2 to sacrifice lead pipe to draw a card because it is a clue.
Oh, right. They're all clues. That's pretty cool. Yeah. We also have knife, which is a single red. As long as it's your turn, equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has first strike. It has an equip cost of 2. And again, you can pay 2, sack it to draw a card.
Does it get you interested in playing equipment?
No, neither of these are are very interesting to me. But you know what I could see is when you have cards like this, I think you want to like be able to access all pieces of it. So the more that I've got, again, let's say I'm trying to do like a multicolor land deck, whatever, with that ETB tapped land that you need to tap something with, then maybe I'm interested in having these weapons lying around, or if I have again more artifact matter stuff, or I guess but like I don't care about equip 2 for +2/+0 or +1/+0 and first strike on your turn is a lot.
It's a tough sell, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that takes us on to some detective typo cards.
Ooh.
Thraben Inspector is back, baby. We've got a new version of this as Novice Inspector. This is white for a 1/2 when it ETBs. Investigate. The card's incredible. You should pick it highly. Never cut it from your deck.
Yeah, I mean, what's a shame is that like back when Thraben Inspector was printed, you could kind of scoop them up late, right? Like
People
some
didn't know.
people just weren't in the know. It was sort of still around the time when one drops were not good and limited or whatever, and so people just didn't care about it. Novice Inspector is going to be like one of the best commons in the set, right?
I would assume so, yeah.
We've also got Market Watch Phantom, 1 and a white for a 2/2. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, Market Watch Phantom gains flying until end of turn. I like this.
It's a nice aggressive card for the detectives deck, as well as presumably for the white-black power 2 or less deck as well.
Well, and they work with themselves, right? So like you can like get a bunch. You play this, and then follow it up with something else, and then play another Market Watch Phantom, and then that's gonna launch this one into the air.
Yeah. Very aggressive 2-drop. Next, we've got Crime Stopper Sprite. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flyer. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may collect Evidence 6. Whenever this enters the battlefield, tap target creature. If evidence was collected, put a stun counter on it.
So you gotta like do work, jump through some hoops to get your flying frost links to keep the thing tapped. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, different format, different
Yeah,
context.
yeah.
I mean, I assume this will be very good in blue-white detectives and not remotely close to playable in blue-green.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
That would be my assumption.
Next up, we have Mistway Spy. It's a single blue for a 1/1 flyer. Has disguise for 1 and a blue. When it's turned face up until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, investigate.
Yeah, this card is interesting. It's hard to evaluate. I think you're always probably playing in a detectives deck. Again, looks like another blue-white evasive creature. Unclear to me, like, whether you're running it out on turn one. Like, are you happy with that? Maybe if you've got,
If
your
you've
private
got the
eyes that are
yeah,
pumping it, like, then you're probably doing that if you've got a draw like that. But is it worth it to run it down for 3 and then disguise it for 2? That's a lot of hoops to jump through to maybe get a couple clues. I'm not sure about this one.
I agree. Yeah, I think this is more likely a blue white gold card than not, based on what we've seen so far.
All right, and lastly here, we've got Hotshot Investigators, 5 and a blue for a 4/4 Vidalcan Detective. When it ETBs, return up to one other target creature to its owner's hand. If you controlled it, investigate. This is a common. It's pretty good.
Is it?
It is 6 mana, common, bounce a thing. And if you did your own stuff, you get to investigate for maybe some ETV value. I don't know, man. Like, this is a curve. I don't know how. I don't think it's going to be a high pick, but I think you're happily playing this as a curve topper in blue decks.
Happily? You're
Solid C. Solid C.
Ooh, I don't know. Jury is out for me here on Hotshot Investigators. Gonna need to see some more evidence on those. Next up, we've got some suspect stuff, some suspicious characters here. First up is Clandestine Meddler, 2 and a black for 3/2 Vampire Rogue at Uncommon. When it enters the battlefield, you suspect up to one other target creature you control, and whenever one or more suspected creatures you control attack, surveil 1.
I mean, seems great.
So it turns it into, again, just to remind people, it has menace and it can't block. So enabling attacks likely and getting surveil on those, that's pretty good.
Yeah, like you curve your 2-drop into Clandestine Meddler, get it in presumably for the next couple of turns before
Right.
it trades off, and you're getting card selection while you do that. I think this card's quite strong in a red-black deck.
Yeah.
All right, next we've got Absolving Lamassu. This is 4 and a white for a 4/3 flying Lamassu at Uncommon. Whenever it enters the battlefield, all suspected creatures are no longer suspected. The presidential pardon, as it
Wow.
were. And whenever this dies, you gain 3 life and suspect up to one target creature an opponent controls.
I have no idea how to evaluate when ETBs all suspected creatures are no longer suspected. Is that good? Is that
I
bad?
mean, yeah, it's great for you, right? This is a defensive card. You're like playing
Okay.
this as a defensive card against your opponent who's trying to kill you with all their suspicious characters. And then you
Uh-huh.
can block, you gain 3. Like, if you want, you can suspect something. If you feel like you've turned the corner and are now wanting to pressure your opponent after stabilizing with this, I think this card's kind of cool. I don't know
Okay.
how good it is, but I like the flavor.
All right. Let's take a look at some of this graveyard enabling stuff here. First up is Festerleech, single black for a 1/1 at Uncommon. When it deals combat damage to a player, you mill 2 cards. Oh, but it's got 1 and a black. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Activate only once each turn.
Yeah, this is going to be a nightmare when it comes down on turn 1. It's got some serious Basking Rootwalla vibes.
Whoa, yeah, because like they just can't.
They just can't block because you have threat of activation for like the first 4 turns.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's
And then it's just
really good on turn 1 and also like not irrelevant later in the game.
right, because whatever, it can be a 3/3 for mana that you will have lying around when it's turn 6 or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, really like that card. Next we have It Doesn't Add Up. 3 black for an instant. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Suspected.
Yeah, so it's got instant speed, which we don't often see on these 5 mana zombify effects, but it doesn't really matter because it can't block. I mean, it matters in the sense that, like, your opponent passes and they think they know what's going on the board, and you're like, aha, here's a menace threat coming at you next turn.
Well, but also just like imagine this with our preview card, Undercity Eliminator. Right?
Mhm.
You're rebuying that. You got a
Yeah,
3/3
but like,
menace. Like you're killing something.
you're not selling me when you have to reference like one of the best cards we've seen so far. Like you're like, but think about this with a card that's already good.
Sure, but
You
I
know?
mean, you want like it's part of the thing is you want to make those cards better. You want to cast them as many times as
Yeah,
possible. It's like
that's
Time
true.
Walk and Vintage Cube. Like
Yeah.
Time Walk makes a bunch of other cards better. Our preview card is going to make It Doesn't Add Up better.
Then we have Macabre Reconstruction. It's 3 and a black for a sorcery at common. It costs 2 less to cast if a creature card was put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn. You return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand.
Have to imagine that'll be playable in some capacity. Probably not that high of a pick.
Right.
We've got a couple collecting evidence cards here. First is Sample Collector, 2 and a green for a 2/3. Whenever it attacks, you can collect evidence 3. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. That does not seem worth collecting 3 evidence. I think there is better stuff that I want to do with my evidence.
Well, maybe it's here on Hedge Whisperer, single green for an 0/3. You may choose not to untap Hedge Whisperer during your untap step. You pay 3 in your green, tap, collect evidence 4. Target land you control becomes a 5/5 green plant boar creature with haste for as long as Hedge Whisperer remains tapped. It's still a land, activate only as a sorcery.
I don't know. I mean, I guess you can keep throwing 5/5s at your opponent late in the game after you've like put a bunch of stuff in your graveyard. I don't love this card.
Kind of in.
You are.
I think so. So I'm kind of in on 1 mana 0/3 in a format of disguise creatures
That will block, yeah.
that it can block in those first few turns. Not everything, obviously, but it can block. And you're right. I mean, like, I do think the longer the game goes on, that's the thing. It's like the deck, like you have to put this in a deck where you have the game go long, but the longer the game goes on, you're gonna have to kill this.
Sure, but like this is the type of card that no one else will want, and you should be able to wheel. Like if you are that deck, I think.
Great.
This does not make me want to like build a collect evidence deck, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
All right, moving on to some artifact stuff. First up, we've got Cornered Crook. This is 4 in a red for a 5/4. Uncommon. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice an artifact. When you do, it deals 3 damage to any target. Sold. Card is excellent. More Flame Tongue Kavu vibes.
Next is Reckless Investigator. This is 1 in a red for an 0/3 at uncommon. Whenever it attacks, you can sack an artifact or discard a card. If you do, draw a card, and Reckless Investigator gets +2/+0 until end of turn. What's really interesting about this, I think we have a card, at least in Greater Garbage, we're going to talk about. Thinking about these things that are like, you could sack an artifact to draw a card. And it's like, well, my clues already do that, right? So why would
you get it at a discount?
Like, you don't have to pay the 2 mana. I'm not saying I'm that excited about this. Like, this is only good when you're attacking with it. It doesn't like have threat of activation because you have to do a thing with it. This seems more constructed applicable to me than it does limited, but that text is interesting.
I don't know. Rummaging on attacks is okay if you want to do some evidence collecting, like pitch a whatever. I don't know. I think it's got potential. Next, we've got Demand Answers. This is 1 in a red for an instant. Common Thrill of Possibility variant here is an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact, or discard a card. Draw 2 cards.
Yeah, I mean, something like play Thraben Inspector, make a clue, and then later on you just get to pay 2 mana, sack that clue, draw 2 cards.
Yeah, it's very strong. I think Demand Answers is flexible.
Yeah.
And worth noting, too, all of this artifact stuff is red. Seems like, certainly from the previews we've seen so far, as that red, even more than red-blue, is very specifically going to be in on doing artifact shenanigans.
Yeah. Next up, we have Gearbane Orangutan. 2 in a red for a 2/2 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Destroy up to 1 target artifact, or sack an artifact. If you do, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on Gearbane Orangutan. So it could be a 3 mana 4/4.
Number 43. Gearbane Orangutan has reach.
Oh, so true. So true. I think this is... I think you're going to have this be a 3 mana 4/4. Like, that's the idea. But this has like common build around vibes to me, right? You just like get as many things that cost 1 or 2 mana that enable the Orangutan, and then you just have 3 mana 4/4s flooding the board.
Yeah, imagine curving Thraben Inspector into this. Like,
yeah,
very, very strong curve.
That's huge.
Next up, we've got Magnetic Snuffler, 5 mana for the 4/4 uncommon construct. When it ETBs, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to Magnetic Snuffler. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Magnetic Snuffler. So this is going to be very good with those clue equipment.
Right, yeah. So it begs the question, Ben, are you a Snuffler truther?
I kind of am. I like this card, but I tend to like bad cards like this. So
yeah, me too.
I don't know that that's like a vote in Snuffler Truther's favor here. Yeah. But yeah, I like the idea of this card. I can't imagine it will be that good.
No, 5 mana 4/4 is a tough sell in that respect. Next up, we have Crime Novelist, 2 in a red for a 1/3 at uncommon. Whenever you sack an artifact, you put a +1/+1 counter on Crime Novelist and add red. Has potential, but such a low floor here as a 3 mana 1/3.
Well, the thing that's nice about this is I think this does a lot of small things well. Whenever you
Okay.
crack clues, you're essentially getting a discount on all your clue cracking, right? It's going to let you crack clues for essentially one because you're getting a red mana back every time. It's also very cool in the artifact deck, like presumably if you can get some number of artifacts laying around in tandem with the Evolving Wilds card, you can make this unblockable, sack your board to turn it into, whatever, a 7-powered thing when they don't have blockers. I think Crime Novelist has a lot going on with it. I like this card.
Okay, cool.
It's a little understated on the front, but I think if you build your deck right, you could get the value back. And lastly, here we've got Harried Dronesmith. This is 3 in a red for a 2/3 at uncommon. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, gains haste until end of turn, sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. This
Ding,
is
ding, ding, in.
well, but it's understated. That's what I wanted to know, because I love this card looking at it, but it is understated for 4 mana. Like, it dies to a lot of things, but assuming you get it going, like a very good enabler for artifact shenanigans.
Yeah, look, the understated thing does make me a little nervous, but the repeatable source of an artifact that, like, you can, in theory, also you peck in with, and then second main phase sacrifice it to any of the many enablers we've seen or payoffs we've seen prior to this. I'm in for Harry Dronesmith to start.
All right. You know what that means? It's time for
Great or garbage. First up, we have Goblin Mask Maker. Single red for a 1/2 Goblin Citizen. Whenever Goblin Mask Maker attacks, face down spells you cast this turn cost 1 less to cast. Turn 1 Goblin Mask Maker. Turn 2 attack. Turn 2 morph.
Yeah, turn 2 disguise, sir. You
Yeah,
gotta use the proper nomenclature. And if you've not played Greater Garbage with us before, the game is what it says in the name. We have to say whether the card is great or garbage. There is no in between. This is to get those takes flowing. Unfortunately, for 1-drops everywhere, I think Goblin Mask Maker is garbage.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not in for the Mask Maker, unfortunately.
You're not in for triple Mask Maker draws where you just dump your whole hand and disguise it on.
How is my hand anything other than empty when I have triple Mask Maker in play?
Yeah, that's fair. Next up, we have Benthic Criminologist. This is 4 and a blue for a 4/5 at common. Whenever it ETBs or attacks, you can sacrifice an artifact. If you do, draw a card.
I mean, in a way, if you have a clue, right? In a way, this is like a 3 mana 4/5 that you can't cast until turn 5. But like, I'm kind of in for great.
You're going great?
I mean, it can't be great because it's just a 5 mana 4/5, so it should be garbage. But like, I don't know. There's something to be said here. And if if there are other, you cash in that Thopter, you peck in with the Thopter, and then you cash it in for a card.
Yeah,
I
mean, I think this is garbage with the potential for some dumpster diving going on.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's fair. I think it's garbage as well. Next we have is Think Twice Back. It's Deduce. 1 and a blue for an instant. Draw a card and investigate. This is just great, right? How is this anything other than great?
I think this is great, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is just great. They're like
paying installments with synergy to draw 2 cards.
Correct, yeah. And I think potentially better than Think Twice in the context of this deck. And for folks who don't know, I'm referencing a 12-year-old card or whatever. Think Twice is 1 and a blue, draw a card with flashback, 2 and a blue. And I think this is better than that.
Yeah, well, certainly in the synergistic deck where you can then sacrifice that clue for free. We've seen a number of ways to do that. So then you're like getting a 2 mana instant speed divination kind of.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next we've got our classic disagreement type card. This is Out Cold. 3 and a blue for an instant at common. Spell can't be countered, which includes the ward ability. Tap up to 2 target creatures and put a stun counter on each of them. Investigate. Give it to me. Give it to me. This card is great.
If it was great, it couldn't be a common, right?
That's not true. This card is so good. It cantrips also.
That's the thing. Is like reading the whole card. I'm like, I've been burned by you before, Out Cold. But then it has that beautiful word investigate at the end, and I'm kind of in.
Like, well, think about Crippling Chill. Like, that was 3 mana to like tap one thing,
keep it tapped, draw a card.
This is 4 mana to do 2 things. That's so much time. Like on your opponent's end step, you tap down to like. I mean, this is a tempo card. You have to, I think, want to be aggressive for this to be at its best. But
the fact that it replaces itself,
deck, this looks broken in a detective's deck.
Well, and the fact that this replaces itself means it's not Even when you're an aggressive detective deck, if you happen to be behind, it buys you so much time and replaces itself. Sure, you have to invest the mana in it, but it does replace itself.
That tone of voice sounds like a man who thinks this card's great.
I think I do, unfortunately. I think this card is great.
Yes, we got him.
Next up is Felonious Rage. This is single red for an instant. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. When that creature dies this turn, create a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. We've seen these kinds of effects before, right? Pump a thing, but only pump its power. And then, like, the haste portion is generally not going to be relevant, I would imagine. But you're just like, pumping a thing, it trades, and then you're left behind with something. The best version of this, I think, was in Innistrad Midnight Hunt, where we saw it was a white spell that pumped a thing and gave it lifelink, and then left you with a 1/1 spirit after the dust was settled, after the thing died. Obviously, not getting the lifelink was a huge portion of that, but like, these cards tend to overperform, I think.
I don't love this card. I'm going garbage. I beat you to the take. You going to join me?
I kind of want to say it's great.
There's no chance. This is not a high pick, first of all. Like, there's just no way you're picking this highly ever. And then, like, when are you excited? Like, it's not helping you win a combat. You're, like, spending a combat trick to hope your creature trades up, and then you're left with a 2/2 behind that's not going to have attacks.
Why can't it have attacks? I have another Felonious Rage coming at it.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Chain them together. I'm going to say great. I mean, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, but I'm going to say great for the sake of the content.
Next, we've got Loxodon Eavesdropper. This is 3 and a green for a 3/3 common element detective. Whenever this enters the battlefield, investigate. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, it gets +1/+1 and gains vigilance until end of turn.
Great. I mean, I know it's a little overcosted for mana 3/3, but you're getting 2 rectangles, and then there's synergy there. Like, I think this is great.
I also want to say great. That was my instinct. I just wanted a gut check with you because it is a tad on the clunky side.
It's a tad on the clunky side, and I feel like they're, catch me on a different day, woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I'd say this was garbage or something. But I think that's an overcorrection for clunkiness. Like, I definitely want to be aware of there's a choke point or there's a replacement level thing you need to worry about at mana value 4 or greater, sometimes mana value 3 or greater. But my guess is that this is a cut above, this
like, so you're anticipating this potentially being one of the top 3 commons? How many of these are you happy with in your 4-drop slot? Then, like, that's my next question.
One of the top green commons, you mean?
Yeah.
I think you're probably happy with a bunch of them.
Really?
That's my guess.
You're happy with 3 of these in your
I think so. I don't know. I don't know what.
That's so tough. I'm actually, I think I'm going to say garbage on this.
You're leaving me in the dust.
I think I am. I don't know. Wow. It's tough. It's tough for me to imagine a deck where I want a multiple of these in my 4-drop slot. Like, I think I will be fine. I
just want to remind you that we did say that about Old Tech Cloud Guard.
Sure, not my best take.
Just want to remind you that we said that about Cloud Guard. So
yeah, I'm not my best take. But I'm going to run it back. Like, the odds got to be with me this time, right? Return to the center.
Broken clock is right twice a day, etc.
Law of averages and all that.
Next up is V2 Ghazi Inspector. 1 on a green for a 1/3 elf detective. As an additional cost to cast it, you can collect evidence 6. It has reach, so 2 mana 1/3 reach at common. If evidence was collected, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and you gain 2 life. I don't know.
I saw a lot of discussion about this in the Lords of the Limited Discord when I was reading through. I kind of like this card. I think, like, you're happy with a 1/3 reach on turn 2, most likely. I mean, certainly you'd be thrilled with that in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Maybe I'm just looking at it through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
And then late in the game, like a 2/4 reach, gain 2 life for 2 mana is not bad. Or a 1/3 reach, gain 2 life, put a +1/+1 counter somewhere where you need it.
My only issue is that, like, collect evidence 6, as we've talked about, like, that's a bit of a cost in terms of, you're setting it up. And if your deck is like a collect evidence deck, I better have better stuff to do. If I'm collect evidence 6ing, I gotta have better payoffs than this.
Well, but it's not that this is a payoff. Like, this is a help you get to your payoffs, right? Like, so picture this with the land cycler, for example.
Okay.
Like, you land cycle on turn 2, And then on turn 4, maybe you're double spelling with this and something else, and you get a 2/4 reach, gain 2 life. Like, then all of a sudden you're stable Mabel from all the wheel spinning you did, basic land cycling to set up like those good uncommons and rares you've got coming down on turns 5, 6, 7. I really picture a home for this, a good home for this, an important home for this in that style of deck. I think this card is great in that style of deck specifically.
I'm not sold. I'm going garbage. I think this is filler.
All right, I hear it. Next, we've got Branch of V2 Ghazi. This is an uncommon land that taps for a colorless. It's got Disguise 3. So this is a land that you can legally disguise.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever it's turned face up, you add 2 mana of any one color. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. I would be more in for this if it disguised for 2 or less than 3. Certainly if I got mana parity or mana advantage.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a leveling war happening in my brain, which is like level 1, this is bad. Level 2 is, well, there's flexibility here, right? It's a land that can also be a creature or whatever. But like level 3 is, I never want to play this as a land. I'm not happy with a colorless land in my deck ever. And I'm also not really happy with Disguise 3. Well, I guess, but it is kind of because you were saying Disguise 2 because then it's mana neutral,
right?
On the flip up, yeah.
On the flip up,
yeah. I'm out on this card. I think this is garbage.
I agree. This is not going to be winning best land of 2024.
I don't think so.
Next, we've got Burden of Proof. This is a cool card. 1 and a blue for an uncommon enchantment aura with flash. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 as long as it's a detective you control. Otherwise, it has base power and toughness 1/1 and can't block detectives.
How many times can they trick us with Kasmina's transmutation, Ben?
But this is such a good Kasmina's transmutation, right? Like, it's so versatile. You can win a combat with it. Just making your 3/3 detective into a 5/5 and eating your opponent's creature is so strong. And then you also, on blocks, can block, flash this in, eat something. I think this card is great. I am pretty confident that I've not gotten got here. This card is great.
I think you've gotten. The burden of proof is not there for me, and I'm calling this garbage.
Wow. I really like this card. I hope this card is good and playable.
You are so amped for blue-white detectives.
I am amped for blue-white detectives. It looks strong.
Next
I think I'm more amped for blue-red artifacts, but Jeskai, I'm here for.
You? Yeah. Convenient target is single red for an uncommon aura enchant creature. When convenient target enters the battlefield, suspect enchanted creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and you can pay 2 and a red to return convenient target from your graveyard to your hand. So after the thing trades off, you can maybe put this on something your opponent controls, and they can't block.
Yeah, I think this card looks very flexible.
This is very aggressive.
The fact that it gives +1/+1. Also, the first time you use it on your stuff, and then later you're removing a blocker. Although I
think you're basically only ever you're playing this on your stuff until
you're killing your opponent,
lethal,
right?
Yeah, and then you can use it as a way to.
They have some giant thing that you just can't get through, and you can afford to tank a couple hits from it.
Well, and there's a cool thing about this sitting in the if you're aggressive, your opponent's kind of stabilized, but this is sitting in the graveyard. They have to respect
the fact that you could at any time rebuy it and put it on their thing.
So they kind of have to act like, okay, your best thing has menace, so I have to leave back an additional blocker. It really does. If you come out to a fast start, it's going to put your opponent in a tough spot. I think this is great.
Yeah, I also really like this card. I think it is great. Next is A Killer Among Us. This is a very flavorful card. This is 4 and a green for an uncommon enchantment. When ETBs, make a 1/1 human, a 1/1 merfolk, and a 1/1 goblin. And then you secretly choose human, merfolk, or goblin. And this has
in what way?
You write it on a piece of paper, baby. You're going to write it on a piece of paper at the Pro Tour.
Wow.
You're going to pull the judge over and whisper it into their ear.
Yeah, okay,
human,
great.
I choose human.
Okay.
And then you're going to reveal, it also has the ability to sacrifice the enchantment to reveal the chosen creature type. If target attacking creature token is the chosen type, you put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and it gains death touch until end of turn. The look on your face.
This card is really cool, right?
It's really cool, but it's also garbage, right?
I don't know, man. So here's how it plays out, right? So you play 5 mana to get 3 1/1s, which is not great. But then it makes it really hard to ever block any of these. Right? You can just attack with all three of them because your opponent doesn't know which one. And so like, they could just be like, well, whatever, I'm gonna eat two of them, and then you're gonna kill my thing, and now I'm gonna have to deal with this, 4/4 with death touch until end of turn, whatever. It's probably garbage, but I think I don't know. This is a hard card. I think once we see it in play, we're gonna have a better sense of it, but probably starting on garbage is correct.
Next,
What is this card?
I love this card. It's so cool. This is Slime Against Humanity. 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. Create a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample. Put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are oozes or named Slime Against Humanity. A deck can have any number of cards named Slime Against Humanity. Best green common. I'm getting to the take first.
What?
You don't think so? This
I-
is such a cool payoff for collecting evidence and drafting multiples of itself. It starts as a 2-mana 2/2, which ideally
a 3-mana 2/2.
3-mana 2/2, yeah. 3-mana 2/2, which is not great. But if you're allowed to collect evidence in excess of what you need or want, I think this has real possibilities to, not that late into the game, be like 3-mana 5/5s, 3-mana 6/6s. I think you can turbo out some big slimes.
I think you're misreading this card.
I am?
I think so. The cards in exile have to be oozes or cards named Slime Against Humanity.
Oh, boo.
There it is. We
That's
solved the case, folks. We solved the mystery of Ben loving this card. I saw your eyes tweet about this. I was like, what is Ben seeing about this card? Okay, there we go.
So sad.
Next up, we have Scene of the Crime. Artifact, land, clue.
So wait, we didn't give this. Was this garbage?
I mean, I think your deflated sigh. I think that answered the question whether this was great or garbage.
That's very sad. All right, I'm glad I didn't embarrass myself with the pre-release. Thanks.
Next is Scene of the Crime. It's an artifact, land, clue at uncommon. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for a colorless mana. You can tap it and an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color. And it's a clue, so you can pay 2, sack it, draw a card.
This is a land I'm into.
I think so.
This does enough.
I think so. I mean, I think I'd like a little bit of extra synergy with it. Like, I don't think I'm playing this in every single deck, right? It feels like in blue-red, this will be at its best, probably. I'd like some artifact synergies or whatever. But I think I'm in for this card.
Oh, yeah, because it's an artifact.
It's an artifact.
Also.
Well, and if you want to sack it, it can pay for itself, right? Because you don't have to tap the clue to sacrifice it. So it's only going to cost you 1 in theory to get rid of this. I think this is great.
Yeah, I'm sold. This card looks great to me as well. Next, we've got Krovod Haunch. This is white for an uncommon food equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, and it's got an equip cost of 2. As all food does, you can pay 2, tap, sacrifice it to gain 3 life. And whenever it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can pay 1 and a white. If you do, create 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens that are coming to eat that meat.
Okay. All right. Just settle down, sir. Single white, equip cost of 2, +2/+0. And then at some point you can cash this in for food and get 2 1/1s for 4 mana. I guess also has some synergy with artifact sacrificing otherwise. But that's usually
it's got a lot going on. I don't know if it's good or not.
What was my rule was, if there's no flavor text on a 1 mana card, it's great. So I don't quite see it all here, but I'm taking my resolution and putting it into practice, and I'm going to say great.
Well, yeah. I mean, at the very least, it's a very cool enabler for you sacrifice this artifact for potentially no mana, like on some of those types of cards that maybe we saw that red card that lets you do stuff like that on attacks and pay 1 and a white to make 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens. This has enough going on that I assume it will be synergistic.
I agree. Our last card here is a red herring. 1 and red for a 2/2 artifact, clue fish with haste. It attacks each combat if able. You know I love me a good Valley Dasher, and this can also pay 2, sack it to draw a card.
So, is that enough? Is red herring great?
I think so, yeah.
Wow, you're on great.
Yeah, I mean, two mana 2/2 haste is good. And this has like so much synergy. Like it's got good types.
Fish.
Yeah, fish, clue. So you can put this in your blue red artifact deck. You can put this in your blue red merfolk deck, like whatever you're doing. No, but I do think like this solves a lot of the problems I have with Valley Dasher. It's not that Valley Dasher can't get in for damage, 2, 4, 6, whatever, but it's going to get got at some point. And the fact that you can mitigate that getting got along with the other synergies, I'll go great on Red Herring.
Yeah, I also really like the looks of Red Herring. I'm going to go great as well.
I mean, is this the first time where our preview episode will be longer than the crash course? We'll have to wait and see until next week. But
there's no chance. That would have to be a very efficient crash course.
So many cards to talk about. This set has me hyped. I know we're always hyped when a new set comes out because we love Magic and we're degenerates, but like, it looks so cool. And I'm just like, they're like we didn't even mention like they're knocking it out of the park with all these names. No More Lies, like doesn't add up. Like it's very cool. I feel like I'm going to have to be wearing a fedora and get out a notepad for the next couple months.
Yeah, I'm going to channel my inner Sherlock Holmes for sure. The flavor has me hyped as well. It just looks like a very fun, cool set. So
yeah,
hopefully the rest of the preview cards keep that trend going. And we're excited to dive in and break this format wide open with you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great place to wrap us up. Thank you, as always, to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
Thank you so much to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this podcast. If you're heading over there for any and all purchases, please use checkout code LOL to let them know we sent you over there. And more importantly, to get 5% off of anything you purchase. You can find all of our content on our website, lordsoflimited.com, links to our episode backlogs, links to our Twitch channels, respectively, our YouTube channel collectively, links to our merch, courtesy of TeePublic, and our tier lists, which we'll have up in about a week and a half. Once the full spoiler drops, Ben will take a pass on that. So all that good stuff is over on our website.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.